Jonathan Powell, said, quote, "We regarded Witkoff and Kushner as Israeli assets that dragged the president into a war he wants to get out of." So when you put those three different theories, the president makes the decisions, everyone follows the president's decision. Number two is a deep state makes the decisions and twists the president's arm, whoever the president is. And number three, blame it all on Israel. What makes the most sense?
I taught this for 16 years on 2 college campuses and for 4 years at the nation's premier war college. And I can tell you that my students taught me as much as I taught them, because they were going through primary documents at the National Security Archives at George Washington University, and sometimes on scene, as it were. And there are so many influences on this kind of decision-making that it's almost impossible to explain them in a short period of time. But the one my students arrived at as being probably the most influential and the most demanding and the most damning was one that David Rothkopf, in his book, where we used his framework for analysis, calls domestic political circumstances. Now, that's a big, as we say in the military, GP medium, GP large tent. You can put a lot in that tent. But I think my students were right when they came to that conclusion on most such decisions. It's the political context domestically, and that includes Epstein, that includes a threatened president, that includes Miriam Adelson and money for his campaign, that includes his fear of not succeeding better than Joe Biden or being perceived as not succeeding. It includes all the things that go into what is America today. On top of that, you've got what you just mentioned, and that's under international circumstances. Under international circumstances, which have rapidly in this country become domestic too, and entered that realm, is Bibi Netanyahu, who's made more trips to the United States than any foreign leader in the history of the country. And will probably make more if he's not dead or going to die. I know the Iranians are after him, and I know they've got some pretty good intelligence on how to go after him. So I'd give him about a 60-40 chance of surviving this. But that doesn't change anything, as he tries to insinuate every time he kills a leader like Hassan Nasrallah, which was a terrible mistake, because Nasrallah was as much a politician as he was a leader of a, quote, terrorist gang, unquote. And he had someone to deal with there. Now he has no one to deal with, and he's finding out what that means. So you have to really take all of these categories and say which one probably has the most influence. In this case, I really think the one with the most influence on Donald Trump right now is Donald Trump himself, and going alone on these decisions and making them without real counsel. And the fact that many people like Bibi Netanyahu know this. They've ferreted it out over time. They know it, and they know they can lead him to wherever they want to lead him. And that's what he's doing. And the fact that probably Epstein was at least working with, if not for, Mossad makes it even more powerful. So you're looking at what Washington called at the time the French threw their weight behind everything that was going on in the sea in particular, and tried to get the United States to violate its own Neutrality Act and come in on their side, paying them back for their help to us for our revolution. And Washington stood up to it, barely stood up to it, because much of the country was influenced by France, and much of the country wanted to go help France against Britain. And there was lingering hatred of Britain from the war anyway. So you got all these influences, but I think in this context, we're looking at a person who is really just subservient to the two aspects of Bibi Netanyahu. The one that is Israel and money, and that's money across the spectrum for Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff and others. And it's also money for Trump's political campaigns. And it's also Bibi Netanyahu's influence at the same time that says you can't leave it because then the money won't come. So he's got all these pressures on him that emanate from that one segment that we call domestic political circumstances. And I think that's what's doing it. He's also looking at the midterms. The midterms are looking awfully bad for the Republicans right now. And who knows what he's going to do? Will he turn this whole circumstance of extravagant use of force overseas in a war of choice? Will he turn that into an ability, and the failure in that into an ability to take over the United States? I don't know. I don't know. But I do know this. The attempt on January the 6th, which had a real patina of coupism, failed, not because our system held. It failed because the coup plotters were incompetent. They will not be incompetent again. And Pete Hegseth, amongst other things, is working really hard on filling the ranks, E5 and below, of the U.S. military with Christian Zionists at a maximum and Christian nationalists at a minimum. And he's already got some flag officers in that category. Yesterday, he had another prayer meeting in the Pentagon. These are, as he says, not mandatory, but any fool knows that if you get a note from the Secretary of Defense announcing a prayer meeting with his personal pastor in the Pentagon, you had probably better go. Otherwise, you're going to adversely influence your career, no matter what your rank or standing. So these are sold out only meetings. And we're getting at the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, for example, of which I'm an advisory board member, we're getting all kinds of communications from the field now, from the field, of people in combat status meetings in the mornings who are being told they're in this war for Jesus. They're in this war to bring about Armageddon. It sounds perhaps like Ted Cruz or Mike Huckabee are giving these briefings. And these people are sending us notes saying, what do we do? How do we get out of this? We don't want anything to do with this Armageddon crap. And you'd be surprised how many NCOs and others are sending those kinds of notices to us. So, as I said, this is going to be if you're going to pull off a successful coup, history screams at you, you must have, in the Westphalian system, a monarch was the same way, a prince was the same way, a baron was the same way. But in our system today, you must have that element of state power, which is most formidable on your side. That's the military. It's always the military. So they're working hard right now to ensure not necessarily the whole military, but enough of it to count is on their side. That worries the hell out of me, because what that really means is if they've just got a third or they've got a quarter, or let's say they even have a half, what's the other half going to do? Well, you're probably going to wind up with a civil war. That's not what we need. That's definitely not what we need. But that is a possibility if you split the military into one half that's on your side and the other half is like General Milley was and doesn't want anything to do with you. Look at what's happening right now with the states. The states right now, their Air National Guards have F-35s in this war. Vermont started a movement, and there are several other states that are looking at it and planning to take it up. You can say it's political, and it probably is, but that's what this country runs on, is politics. Vermont is saying, we're going to take our guard away from you, Mr. President. Our guard is going to come home and not fly your F-35s in your war. And by the way, you can have your F-35s back if you want them. Imagine if we had 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 states start doing that.